Hey everyone, it's Sarah and I'm back to film my reading journal for the month of July. So first things first, I have my tracker for how much I read each day. I have continued to read every day. I've read every day so far in the year. And I'd say I averaged about an hour, maybe 2 this month. Sometimes I just read, listening to my audiobook on my way to or from work. Sometimes I'll read on my lunch break. So sometimes I'll just read a little bit before bed, and sometimes I'll spend, hours focusing on reading. So it just depends on the day, but I try to fit it in, where and whenever I can. So then moving on, I read 5 books this month. So 1 more book than last month. 1,853 pages, and my favorite book of the month was Sunrise on the Reaping. And then looking at my monthly calendar, I finished a few books that I had previously started. There's still another book that I had started in June that I haven't finished yet. Hopefully I'll be finishing that shortly in August. And then I had a couple of other books that I read as well. So not my best reading month, but July was extremely busy, lots of family events. I think we were gone every single weekend doing something, traveling somewhere. So 5 books is pretty good when you consider all of that. Again, I mostly focused on audiobooks this month. That's just been what's easiest for me. I'm still trying to pop in and read some of these other books just because I do own a lot of physical books. Sometimes it's easier to get, a Kindle version than an audiobook, depending on how popular the book is. So I'm working my way through my TBR, but audiobooks just seem to be where the bulk of my reading is going to end up for the year. I pulled a quote from Sunrise on the Reaping, and that's part of our trouble thinking things are inevitable, not believing change is possible. I didn't have any new releases that I was interested in this month, or at least that I, had on my radar. And then these are all the books that I was working on. This Book Will Bury Me and Dope Sick were ones that I was reading, but I just haven't finished yet. Then for my bingo, I usually pull prompts from my challenges in the back of my planner, and I am behind on my monthly challenges, so there were some that I didn't read the prompts for in June that I carried over to July, and then there's some that I still haven't finished from June and July, so I'll just keep carrying them over until I read the books. So for August, I've already pre-filled out some of my prompts for, like I said, mostly my monthly prompts, where there's 1 prompt per month. The buzzword challenge, the buzzword cover challenge, and so eventually I'll finish them. I think it's fine if it doesn't necessarily happen in the month that I'm aiming for, that it was the prompt for, as long as I do it at some point. And then in terms of my goals, I read every day and I finished Throne of Glass. I didn't quite make it to 6 books, but I still think that I did a pretty good job. Then looking at my Goodreads tracker, I'm at 52 books so far for the year, which is over, the halfway mark. 5 books for the month is a little bit lower than my average for the year, but still reading is good. Then I also have my reading tracker where I just color in the books based on what month I read it in. So I colored in the ones for July. And then I've hit my goal of 50 books. And like I said, my ultimate goal for the year is 100 books if I can do it. So I'm a little behind. I probably should be, 4 more books probably read so far to be on track for 100, but if I don't make 100 books, it'll be okay. Just keep doing my best. And then going into what I read this month, I first started off with The Maid. I really enjoyed reading The Maid. I think I heard Martha from Martha's Fragrance Corner read it maybe a few months ago or maybe many months ago. And so I was interested in picking it up. But you follow Molly, who is a maid at this fancy hotel, and Molly has a very unique, eccentric kind of personality. She's, maybe eccentric's not the right word, but she's unusual, and so she's very proper. She's tidy. She doesn't always get the subtle social cues that people give off, and so her social skills are a little bit lacking. She can be a little bit naive, especially, like I said, not getting some of the things, or the subtler meanings that people are giving off. And so, but she's very hardworking. She has a sense of right and wrong. And, ultimately she's doing, her best. And I really liked Molly. So Molly's cleaning one day and she finds a dead body in her rooms. So Mr. Black is, kind of one of the big shots that comes to stay at the hotel often. He was staying in the penthouse suite and he is found dead. And because Molly's a little bit different, because she maybe doesn't emote the same way that a lot of other people do, the police, kind of pull her as a possible suspect or one of their top suspects. And so then, the book is spent trying to figure out, what happened and clear Molly's name. I really enjoyed it. I did think that the audiobook added something to, the experience of reading it. I liked how the author or the audiobook narrator portrayed Molly. I just think that it was read really, really well, and I feel like I could really understand Molly, even better than I could have just written on the page, if that makes sense. So I gave it 5 stars. Then we have The Friend Zone. The Friend Zone I gave 3 stars to. This is an Abby Jimenez. It's probably my least favorite Abby Jimenez so far, if I'm being honest. But you're following Kristen and Josh, and Kristen they're both in their best friends' weddings. So that's how they kind of interact, and they meet up with each other. Josh has just moved to the area, and then they're both in their best friend's wedding. And so Kristen has a long distance boyfriend. He's in the military. Josh is single. He just got out of a long-term relationship. And Kristen has a lot of health problems that she's kind of, they keep coming up, that, basically she isn't going to be able to have kids. She's, upset about that. She would like to have kids someday, but she can't. And, she's going to end up having surgery and, hopefully to clear up some of her health issues. But, she's got a lot going on. And Kristen and Josh have an attraction to one another, but, ultimately, it's not going to work out for them because she has a boyfriend. She's got these other things going on in her life. Josh wants a big family with a lot of kids. So, Kristen feels that, even if she didn't have a boyfriend, it wouldn't work out between them anyways because, she can't have this big family that he wants. So I gave it 3 stars. The author had a note at the end that, a lot of the experiences that Kristen goes through, a lot of the dialogue come directly from experiences that one of her friends, had in real life. And, that she took a lot of inspiration from her friend's personal story. And I think that's all, really great. But for me, I felt like it was kind of like the same struggle the entire book. And, it just kind of felt like, it's like, come on already, I don't know. It was a little boring at times, or a little bit just overkill to have the same thing over and over and over again. Then, along with that, um, I listened to this audiobook with my husband because we were on a road trip and I like had to read it from the library, otherwise it was going to get returned back. Not normally the book I would choose for us to read together, but he and I both had, multiple conversations where we'd pause the audiobooks and say, if they just talked to each other, they would solve all their problems. If they just sat down and talked to each other. They spent so much time assuming what the other person wanted or needed or what was best for the other person without actually talking to the other person, that it just felt like it was just nonstop, well, I'm not right for this person because I can't have kids, and well, he deserves better because I can't have kids, or I don't know why she's, what's wrong, why she won't talk to me, and I don't know, it just felt like it was just, they just needed to sit down and have a conversation, and the book would have been a lot shorter. So I gave it 3 stars. There were, lots of parts of the books, lots of parts within the book that we did really enjoy. But overall, there were times when I felt like, come on already, move on to the next point. Like, we've already talked about this 8 other times. Next, we have all the other mothers hate me. Goodness, my little words are hard. But all the other mothers hate me. This one follows Florence, and Florence was a member of a girl band like 10 years ago. She got pregnant and had to leave the group before they hit it big. And so, she kind of had this like failed career. Now she's a single mom to this 10-year-old boy. And her son Dylan is another unique character. Again, they don't really describe exactly what kind of diagnosis he has, but he has a very black and white sense of right and wrong. He doesn't get along well with a lot of other kids. He doesn't really have a lot of friends. He's very into the environment, and, they've had trouble in the past where he's gotten into fights at school, when other kids were doing something that he thought was wrong. So they talk about Turtlegate, that there's a turtle that this kid is I don't know if he was poking it with a stick or something, where he's hurting the turtle, and her son, fought this kid and injured this kid. And so, she's not necessarily the most popular person. She doesn't have a lot of friends. Her son's not the most popular person. And when a boy in his class goes missing, she's really worried about the possibility that her son might be involved. Her son was the partner with this student when they went on a field trip, and the boy went missing from the field trip. And so, yeah, she's worried that her son might be involved. Her son isn't answering all of her questions. Her son seems to be hiding something. And so, again, instead of just asking her son, what really happened, because she's getting afraid that she doesn't want to know the answer, she's just trying to solve the mystery herself and, kind of deflect suspicion from her son by finding someone else that's a better candidate for the kidnapping or the disappearance. And then also, along with that, finding a scapegoat if possible or if needed. She definitely doesn't make the best decisions when it comes to, kind of thinking things through. She just kind of has a single-minded, like, she wants her son to be protected, wants her son to be safe, even if he is the guilty person. So in that regard, it was hard to relate to Florence, because she made a lot of decisions that I thought were dumb. She made a lot of decisions that I wouldn't do. She made a lot of decisions that just weren't thought through, weren't smart. Again, I listened to this with my husband, and he had to keep pausing the audiobook to make comments about, oh my gosh, this person. So I gave it 3 stars. I did think that the story was interesting. I wanted to know what happened. we read it pretty quickly in terms of how long it took us to get through the book, but ultimately, there were things that I just couldn't relate to with the main character. She wasn't my favorite character. But I guess you can understand to some extent, like some people would do absolutely anything for their child, even if their child is guilty. So then we have Throne of Glass. Throne of Glass is a book by Sarah J. Maas. I've previously read the ACOTAR series, and my best friend has been like, you need to read Throne of Glass. You need to read Throne of Glass. You need to read it. And so I think there's 7 or 8 books in the series. There's quite a few. But Throne of Glass is the first book in the series, and you're following the main character, who I want to say her name is pronounced Selena, but I will say that I'm not always great with fantasy book pronunciations, and I did not read this as an audiobook. And she is this assassin that was locked up in prison for a year, and the prince comes to the prison to release her if she will agree to fight in this competition the king is putting on to find the best assassin in all of the land. And then whoever wins the competition will agree to be the king's personal assassin for, I think, 4 years. And then after being his assassin for 4 years, then they'll win their freedom, and then they can, go off and do their own thing. And so that's the only way that she's getting it out of this prison, essentially, is if she can win this competition. And so I think, every week they have, or every couple of days, they have a different skill set or a different challenge that they're doing, whether it's picking out poison from a multitude of drinks, or, a show of strength, sword fighting, etc. And so, as this competition is wearing on, people are getting eliminated in the competition just based on, losing challenges. But you also have competitors that are getting murdered, and they're getting murdered, in a very, gruesome, seems like there's other things going on outside of just, I don't know, maybe some, I don't want to say supernatural, but, maybe some magic involved, or maybe, someone that's not human is killing these people. And so I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I didn't give it 5 stars because there were times that I got a little bit bored, and I had trouble. I was reading this as a physical book, and I kept falling asleep. And I don't know if it was me or the book or what, but it was a struggle at times just to keep reading. I'm trying to get the audiobooks for some of the subsequent novels, and I'm hoping that'll help, but and especially too with pronunciation and things like that. Sometimes if I can't pronounce something in the book, I have trouble remembering it because, I don't know, the pronunciation in my head keeps changing, or I'm so focused on the pronunciation of something that I can't recall it later on, details about it. So anyways, that was Throne of Glass. I gave it 4 stars. And then last but not least, I have Sunrise on the Reaping. This is the newest prequel in the Hunger Games series. So the Hunger Games series, just briefly, if you've never read it before, the Hunger Games original trilogy follows Katniss Everdeen and the Hunger Games. And there was a civil war fought in a future dystopian America, type, America that is named Panem, and the capital won, and they're in charge of everything. And as punishment for the districts that tried to overthrow the capital and tried to win, their freedom from the capital rule, they are punishing them by grabbing one boy and one girl from each district once a year to fight to the death in the Hunger Games. And there's one victor for each competition. And so, so Katniss is much later. She's at the 74th annual Hunger Games, Sunrise on the Reaping is the 50th Hunger Games, and then the other prequel, A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, is the 10th Hunger Games. So, you know, there's definitely, you know, some time jumps between the different stories. And my recommendation, if you're interested in reading them and you haven't read all of the books, or, you know, whatnot, I would recommend reading them in publishing order. I would start with the Hunger Games trilogy, then I would do the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and then Sunrise on the Reaping, because there's things that would be spoiled in here from the other books, you know, so yeah, I feel like you should read them in published order to get the most out of it. I mean, you could read this and have things be spoiled in some of the other books, but, you know, I think the best experience is to read them in publishing order. So in the original Hunger Games trilogy, Haymitch is a past victor of the Hunger Games for District 12, and as part of his winning the Hunger Games, he has to mentor all of the future children that are set to compete in the Hunger Games. And so Katniss is one of the competitors in the 74th annual Hunger Games, and Haymitch is her mentor. And so you know that he's made it through the Hunger Games in the past. In, you know, the original trilogy, he has, you know, a drinking problem. You don't know a lot about his past, but you know that there's a lot of hardship that he's had to endure. And so this is telling his story, essentially. I enjoyed this a lot. I thought it was interesting to know about his backstory. I think that there was a lot of, you know, allusions to other things that happen in the other books. That was just fun to get, I don't know, more insight into some things, or see characters that come up later in the books. There's a lot of characters that you'll find in other books that, again, it was just interesting to see them pop up here too and get maybe some more backstory. So I really thought that this was a good one. I enjoyed it. I cried. I had a good time. And there were still a lot of twists, even though you know that Haymitch wins the Hunger Games. There were still a lot of twists involved, and so I felt like I didn't know the story, if that makes sense. You know, there was still so much new information. There were so many new characters, even though there were a lot of familiar characters too. And so, you know, I had a great time learning more about, you know, this universe that it all happens in. So 5 stars. It was my favorite book of the month, and I think they're making a movie out of it already. So look forward to that one day. But yeah, that was everything I read this month for the month of July, and hopefully I will be back not too long after August ends to film my August reading journal. But I hope you enjoyed watching, and I will see you next month. Bye.